I stood at the edge of what should have been empty farmland, staring at a pristine suburban neighborhood that had no right to exist. 90 identical houses stretched before me in perfect rows, their manicured lawns gleaming under the afternoon sun. Children played on swing sets while parents watered flower beds, completely unaware that every single home sat on land that belonged to me. My hands trembled as I held the old property deed my grandfather had left me 5 years ago. The legal description matched exactly. The GPS coordinates were identical. This entire development, worth millions of dollars, had been built on my family land without my knowledge or permission. I pulled out my phone and dialed my attorney with shaking fingers. My voice cracked as I spoke the words that would change everything. They stole my land and built an entire neighborhood on it. What do I do now? That was the moment I realized I was about to go to war with one of the most powerful HOAs in the county, and I had no idea if I could win. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in October, sandwiched between credit card offers and grocery store flyers. The envelope looked official, with Maplewood Hills Homeowners Association printed in bold letters across the top. I almost threw it away, assuming it was junk mail meant for someone else. But something made me tear it open. Inside was a formal notice demanding that I pay $350 in monthly HOA fees for a property at 1247 Oakwood Drive. The letter was addressed to me personally, using my full legal name. It threatened legal action if I did not comply within 30 days. I had never heard of Oakwood Drive in my life. I had never lived in any HOA community. I grabbed my laptop and searched for the address online. The satellite images showed a massive housing development with dozens of identical homes arranged in perfect suburban order. My stomach dropped as I recognized something familiar about the location. I rushed to my home office and pulled out the metal filing cabinet where I kept all my important documents. My hands shook as I found the folder labeled Grandfather's Estate. Inside was the property deed he had left me when he passed away 5 years ago. 47 acres of farmland on the outskirts of town, land that had been in our family for 3 generations. I had never done anything with it because I was too busy dealing with my grief and my own life struggles. I compared the legal property description on the deed with the address from the HOA letter. The coordinates matched perfectly. My heart pounded as I realized what this meant, but I needed to see it with my own eyes. 20 minutes later, I pulled into the entrance of Maplewood Hills subdivision. A gleaming sign welcomed residents to their premier community. Stone pillars flanked the main road, and perfectly trimmed hedges lined the sidewalks. I drove slowly through street after street, counting house after house. Each home was worth at least $400,000. There were playgrounds, a community pool, a clubhouse, and walking trails. This was not some small development. This was a major residential community that housed hundreds of people. I parked at the end of Oakwood Drive and stepped out of my car. The afternoon sun felt hot on my face as I walked to what should have been the center of my grandfather's old farmland. I could almost see him here, walking these fields with his border collie, checking on his crops every morning before sunrise. Now there was nothing but suburban perfection. House after house after house, all sitting on land that legally belonged to me. I pulled out my phone and called the county record's office. The clerk was helpful but confused when I explained my situation. She put me on hold for 15 minutes while she pulled up the property records. "Sir, I am looking at the documents now," she said when she came back on the line. "The land you are asking about was sold to Blackstone Development Corporation 3 years ago. The sale was approved and recorded properly." My legs felt weak. That is impossible. I never sold anything to anyone. I am sorry, sir, but the records show a legal transfer of ownership. The documents appear to be in order. I hung up the phone and sat down on the curb, my head spinning. Someone had stolen my land and built an entire neighborhood on it. But how was that even possible? And what was I supposed to do about it? I did not sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how someone could steal 47 acres of land without me knowing. By morning, I had made my decision. I was going to find out exactly what happened, no matter what it cost me. My first call was to a private investigator named Sarah Chen who specialized in financial fraud cases. She had excellent reviews online and seemed to understand complex property disputes. When I explained my situation, she was quiet for a long moment. "This sounds like a sophisticated real estate fraud scheme," she said finally. "I have seen similar cases before. Someone targets inherited property from people who are not actively monitoring their assets." Sarah agreed to take my case and recommended a forensic document expert who could analyze the paperwork trail. Within a week, we had assembled a small team of specialists who began digging into every aspect of the land transfer. What we discovered made my blood run cold. The property had been illegally transferred to Blackstone Development Corporation using forged documents and falsified signatures. Someone had created an entire fake paper trail to make the theft look legitimate. The fraud had been orchestrated by a man named Richard Blackstone, the president of Maplewood Hills HOA and owner of Blackstone Development. He had used a shell company called Tri-County Land Holdings to create the illusion of a legal sale. "Look at the timeline," Sarah explained, spreading documents across her desk. "Your grandfather died in March. The fraudulent land transfer happened in July of the same year. Blackstone specifically targeted your property while you were dealing with your grief and settling the estate." The document expert confirmed that my signature had been forged on multiple legal papers. Someone had practiced copying my handwriting and created dozens of fake documents to support the illegal transfer. The level of preparation was shocking. But the conspiracy went deeper than just Blackstone. Sarah discovered that he had paid bribes to county officials to expedite the approval process and avoid standard oversight procedures. The planning department had fast-tracked the development permits without proper review. "This is not Blackstone's first time," Sarah told me during our third meeting. "I found evidence of similar land grabs in 3 other counties over the past 10 years. He targets families who have recently inherited property and are not paying close attention to their assets." My investigator estimated that Blackstone had made over $20 million from this illegal scheme. He would identify valuable inherited land, forge the documents needed to steal it, pay bribes to get the transfers approved, then build developments and sell homes to unsuspecting buyers. The homeowners in Maplewood Hills had no idea they were living on stolen land. They had bought their houses in good faith, believing everything was legal and legitimate. If my case succeeded, their property values could become worthless overnight. I realized I was not just fighting one corrupt developer. I was taking on an entire network of criminals who had turned property theft into a profitable business model. County officials, real estate agents, title companies, and contractors were all part of the scheme. Sarah presented me with a thick folder of evidence documenting the fraud. Bank records, forged documents, email communications, and witness statements painted a clear picture of criminal conspiracy. But she warned me that proving the case in court would be expensive and difficult. Blackstone has been doing this for years because he is smart and well-connected, she explained. He has expensive lawyers and political allies. This is not going to be an easy fight. I looked at the evidence folder and thought about my grandfather, who had worked this land his entire life. He had planned to pass it down to future generations, not have it stolen by criminals who preyed on grieving families. I do not care how hard it is, I told Sarah. They stole my family land and built houses on it. I am going to make them pay for what they did. That night I called my attorney and told him we were going to war. My attorney, David Morrison, had been handling basic legal matters for my family for over 15 years. But when I walked into his office with boxes of evidence documenting the land fraud, he immediately knew this case was beyond his expertise. You need specialists, David told me bluntly. This is going to require a team of attorneys who focus on real estate fraud, criminal law, and civil litigation. And I have to warn you, this could cost you everything you own. He referred me to Patricia Williams, a partner at one of the city's most prestigious law firms. Patricia had spent 20 years prosecuting white-collar crime before switching to private practice. Her reputation for taking down corrupt developers was legendary. When I met Patricia in her downtown office, I could tell she was taking my case seriously. She spent 3 hours reviewing the evidence Sarah had gathered, asking detailed questions about every document and witness statement. This is one of the most sophisticated real estate fraud schemes I have ever seen, Patricia said finally. But the evidence is strong. If we can prove criminal conspiracy, you could be entitled to significant damages. Patricia assembled a legal dream team that included a criminal fraud specialist, a real estate litigation expert, and a class action attorney who could represent the affected homeowners. The initial retainer fee was $50,000, money I did not have. I made the hardest decision of my life. I took out a second mortgage on my own home to fund the legal battle. If we lost the case, I would lose everything I owned. But I could not let these criminals get away with stealing my family land. Our legal strategy had 3 main components. First, we would file criminal fraud charges against Blackstone and his co-conspirators. Second, we would pursue civil litigation to reclaim my property and seek monetary damages. Third, we would work with federal authorities to investigate the broader pattern of real estate fraud. Patricia warned me that the case could take years to resolve and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. Blackstone would fight back with expensive lawyers and political connections. There would be attempts to discredit me, delay proceedings, and exhaust my financial resources. Are you prepared to risk everything for this? Patricia asked me directly. I thought about my grandfather walking those fields every morning, proud of the land that had supported our family for generations. I thought about the criminals who had targeted us during our time of grief, stealing what was rightfully ours while we mourned. Yes, I told her, I am prepared to risk everything. We filed the first round of lawsuits on a cold Monday morning in December. Criminal fraud charges against Richard Blackstone, conspiracy charges against his business partners, and civil suits against the HOA, the development company, and the county officials who had accepted bribes. The legal documents filled 4 large binders. Every fraudulent signature, every forged document, and every illegal payment was meticulously documented. Patricia called it the most comprehensive fraud case she had ever assembled. But filing the lawsuits was just the beginning. We needed to build an airtight case that could withstand the fierce legal counterattack that was surely coming. I spent weeks organizing evidence, preparing witness statements, and documenting every aspect of the conspiracy. My dining room table became a war room covered with legal papers, property maps, and investigative reports. I worked 16-hour days reviewing documents and preparing for depositions. The stress was overwhelming, but I knew this was my only chance for justice. Patricia explained that if we won the case, I could be entitled to the full value of the development plus punitive damages for the criminal fraud. The total settlement could exceed $20 million, but she also warned me that powerful people would do everything possible to stop us. "They are going to come after you personally," she said. "They will try to destroy your reputation, question your motives, and make your life miserable. Are you ready for that?" I looked at the photo of my grandfather that I kept on my desk, remembering the stories he used to tell about working the land with his father. This was about more than money. This was about justice for my family and all the other victims who had been too afraid or too poor to fight back. "Let them come," I said. "I am not backing down." Richard Blackstone did not waste any time launching his counterattack. Within a week of our filing the fraud charges, his team of expensive lawyers had flooded the court system with motions to dismiss, requests for sanctions, and claims that I was a frivolous litigant trying to steal homes from innocent families. The local newspaper ran a front-page story titled, "Man Claims He Owns Entire Neighborhood." The article made me sound like a delusional opportunist who was trying to destroy a peaceful community over a paperwork dispute. They interviewed several homeowners who expressed fear that I was going to force them out of their houses. "This man is trying to steal our homes," said Jennifer Walsh, a mother of 3 who lived on Maple Street. "We bought our house in good faith. We have been living here for 2 years. This is where our children go to school and where we have built our lives." The article did not mention the forged documents or the evidence of criminal fraud. It portrayed the situation as a simple property dispute rather than a sophisticated theft scheme. Reading it made me sick to my stomach. Blackstone hired a public relations firm to wage a media campaign against me. They sent letters to every homeowner in Maplewood Hills claiming that I was a greedy opportunist who wanted to tear down their community for financial gain. The letters urged residents to contact their city council representatives to stop my frivolous lawsuit. The harassment began almost immediately. Someone called my employer and claimed I was involved in illegal real estate speculation. Anonymous phone calls to my home at all hours of the night. My car tires were slashed twice in 1 week. Someone threw rocks through my front windows while I was sleeping. I installed security cameras around my house and changed my phone number, but the intimidation campaign continued. Letters arrived at my workplace calling me a land thief and threatening legal action if I did not drop my case. The stress was affecting my health and my ability to do my job. Patricia warned me that this was standard procedure for high-stakes litigation. "They want to make your life so miserable that you give up and go away," she explained. "This is psychological warfare designed to break your will to fight." But the worst moment came when Blackstone's lawyers filed harassment charges against me. They claimed that I had been trespassing on private property and threatening homeowners. They requested a restraining order to prevent me from entering the Maplewood Hills subdivision. The court hearing was a nightmare. Blackstone's attorney painted me as an unstable individual who was stalking innocent families and disrupting their peaceful community. They had witness statements from homeowners claiming I had made threatening remarks and behaved erratically. None of it was true, but the judge seemed to believe their version of events. The restraining order was granted, prohibiting me from setting foot on what was legally my own property. I walked out of the courthouse feeling completely defeated. My own attorney began suggesting that we should consider settling the case for a fraction of what the land was worth. They have unlimited resources and political connections, David told me. Maybe we should take whatever we can get and move on with our lives. That night, I sat in my kitchen staring at the pile of legal bills that was growing larger every week. My savings account was empty. My credit cards were maxed out. My second mortgage payment was due in 2 weeks, and I did not have the money to pay it. I called my sister in California to ask if I could borrow money to continue the fight. She had always been supportive, but even she was starting to question my decision to pursue the case. "Maybe you should listen to your lawyer," she said gently. "This is destroying your life. Is it really worth losing everything you own over some farmland that you never even used?" I looked out my kitchen window at the darkness beyond. Somewhere out there, Richard Blackstone was sleeping peacefully in his expensive house, confident that he had broken my spirit and ended my threat to his criminal enterprise. But he was wrong. I was not giving up. I was going to find a way to expose the truth and make him pay for what he had done to my family. The phone call that changed everything came on a rainy Thursday morning in March. I was drinking coffee and reviewing legal documents when my phone rang. The caller identified herself as Maria Rodriguez, and she said she worked for the county planning department. "I have been following your case in the news," Maria said quietly. "I think you should know that there are things about the Maplewood Hills approval process that were not done properly." My heart started racing. Maria agreed to meet me at a coffee shop downtown that afternoon. She was a nervous woman in her 50s who had worked for the county for over 20 years. She explained that she had been uncomfortable with how quickly the Maplewood Hills project had been approved. "The normal review process takes 6 to 8 months," Maria explained. "But this project was fast-tracked through in less than 6 weeks. Richard Blackstone had meetings with department supervisors that I was not allowed to attend. Maria had kept copies of internal emails and documents that showed irregularities in the approval process. She had evidence that environmental impact studies were waived, that standard inspections were skipped, and that key safety requirements were ignored. "I think Richard Blackstone paid bribes to get this project approved," she told me. "But I was afraid to speak up because I need my job. When I saw what he was doing to you in the newspapers, I realized I could not stay quiet anymore." I immediately called Patricia and arranged for Maria to meet with our legal team. Her testimony and documents provided the missing piece of our puzzle. We now had evidence of the bribery scheme that had enabled the fraudulent land transfer. But Maria's revelations were just the beginning. Patricia's investigation had uncovered similar fraud schemes in 3 other counties. She contacted the FBI's white-collar crime division and presented evidence of a multi-county conspiracy involving real estate fraud, bribery, and money laundering. Within 2 weeks, federal agents raided Richard Blackstone's offices and seized boxes of documents. They also executed search warrants at the homes of 2 county officials who had been involved in approving the fraudulent land transfers. The story exploded in the local media. Suddenly, I was no longer portrayed as a greedy opportunist trying to steal homes from innocent families. I was the victim of a sophisticated criminal conspiracy that had defrauded multiple families and corrupted local government. The tide of public opinion shifted dramatically. Investigative reporters began examining Blackstone's other development projects and found evidence of similar fraud schemes. The county attorney announced a grand jury investigation into public corruption charges. Several homeowners in Maplewood Hills contacted me directly to apologize for believing the lies that Blackstone's PR campaign had spread about me. They realized they were victims too, having purchased homes that might be worthless if the land had been stolen. "We had no idea what was really happening," said Tom Bradley, who lived on Oak Street. "We thought you were trying to take our homes. Now we understand that you were trying to expose the people who cheated all of us." Jennifer Walsh, the mother who had been quoted in the newspaper criticizing me, called to apologize personally. "I am so sorry for what we said about you," she told me. "We were scared and we believed what they told us. Thank you for fighting to expose the truth." The most satisfying moment came when 3 members of the HOA board resigned and issued a public statement distancing themselves from Richard Blackstone. They admitted they had been unaware of the fraud scheme and pledged to cooperate fully with the investigation. Patricia filed an emergency motion to freeze all of Blackstone's assets to prevent him from hiding money or fleeing the jurisdiction. The court granted the motion, effectively shutting down his ability to continue operating his criminal enterprise. "We have them on the run now," Patricia told me after the court hearing. "The federal investigation gives us tremendous leverage in the civil case. They are going to want to settle this quickly before more criminal charges are filed." But I was not interested in settling for a fraction of what my land was worth. After months of harassment, intimidation, and character assassination, I wanted full justice. I wanted these criminals to face the consequences of their actions. "I want every penny they stole," I told Patricia, "and I want them to go to prison for what they did to my family." The nightmare was finally turning in my favor, but the real fight was just beginning. The first domino fell on a bright Monday morning in June when federal agents arrested Richard Blackstone at his country club. Local news cameras captured him being led away in handcuffs while he tried to hide his face behind a golf magazine. After months of him attacking my character and claiming I was a fraud, seeing him face criminal charges felt like vindication. The federal indictment was devastating. Blackstone was charged with wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and racketeering under the RICO Act. The charges carried a potential sentence of 30 years in federal prison. 2 county officials were arrested the same day on bribery and corruption charges. Patricia called me with the news while I was at work. "The feds have built an airtight case," she said. "They have bank records showing the bribe payments, recorded phone conversations, and testimony from multiple witnesses. Blackstone is going to prison." But the criminal case was just the beginning. Our civil lawsuit was proceeding on a parallel track, and the evidence from the federal investigation had strengthened our position enormously. Patricia was confident we could win a judgment that would exceed $20 million. The trial lasted 3 weeks and drew national media attention. Experts testified about the sophisticated nature of the fraud scheme. Maria Rodriguez courageously took the stand to describe the bribery and corruption she had witnessed. The forensic document examiner explained how my signature had been forged on dozens of legal papers. I testified for 2 full days, describing how my family had owned the land for generations and how the criminals had targeted us during our time of grief. The jury seemed moved by my story, especially when I talked about my grandfather's dream of passing the land down to future generations. Blackstone's defense team tried to portray the case as a simple business dispute, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a verdict in my favor. They awarded me full ownership of the entire development plus $15 million in punitive damages. The judge's comments during sentencing were particularly satisfying. This case represents a brazen theft of family property through sophisticated fraud and corruption, he said. The defendants showed no remorse for their actions and attempted to destroy the reputation of the victim who exposed their crimes. Richard Blackstone was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution to all victims. The two county officials received sentences of 5 and 7 years respectively. All three men were banned from working in real estate or government for life. But the victory felt bittersweet when I considered the impact on the innocent homeowners who had purchased houses in Maplewood Hills. These families had invested their life savings in homes that were now legally worthless because they sat on stolen land. I met with Patricia to discuss how we could help these victims. "You are not legally required to do anything for them," she explained. "But you now own their homes and the land they sit on. You can decide what happens next." I thought about Jennifer Walsh and Tom Bradley and the other families who had apologized to me after learning the truth. They were victims of the same criminals who had stolen my land. They deserved compassion, not punishment. Working with my legal team, I established the Maplewood Hills Victim Compensation Fund using money from the court judgment. The fund provided fair market value payments to homeowners who wanted to relocate, plus moving expenses and temporary housing assistance. For families who wanted to stay, I offered to sell them their homes at cost, with affordable payment plans and no interest charges. Most of the homeowners chose this option, allowing them to remain in the community they had grown to love. The local newspaper ran a follow-up story about the compensation fund, praising my decision to help the innocent victims rather than punish them for the crimes committed by others. The headline read, "Fraud Victim Helps Neighbors Rebuild Their Lives." County officials implemented new oversight procedures to prevent future fraud and protect property owners from similar schemes. They established an independent review board to examine all large development projects and required additional documentation for property transfers. Patricia helped me establish a legal defense fund for other families facing similar land fraud. Within 6 months, we had identified 12 additional cases where criminals had used similar schemes to steal inherited property from grieving families. The story became a cautionary tale taught in law schools across the country. Legal experts used the case to illustrate how sophisticated criminals exploit weaknesses in the property transfer system and target vulnerable victims during times of personal crisis. But for me, the most important outcome was justice for my grandfather and my family. The land he had worked his entire life would remain in our family legacy, protected from criminals who thought they could steal it without consequences. 6 months after the trial ended, I stood in the same spot where I had first discovered the Maplewood Hills development. But now, instead of feeling anger and betrayal, I felt a deep sense of peace and purpose. The nightmare was over, and something beautiful was beginning to take its place. I had made the decision to convert half of the property into a public park and community center dedicated to my grandfather's memory. The Harrison Family Community Park would provide recreational facilities for all the families in the area, including the former Maplewood Hills residents who had chosen to stay and purchase their homes. The other half of the property would remain residential, but under very different circumstances. The families who stayed were no longer part of an HOA controlled by criminals. Instead, they formed a genuine community organization focused on neighborly cooperation rather than authoritarian control. Jennifer Walsh, the mother who had initially opposed me, became one of my closest allies in planning the community center. "You could have destroyed our lives after you won the case," she told me. Instead, you helped us rebuild and create something better than what we had before. The legal defense fund I established had grown beyond my expectations. Donations poured in from people across the country who had heard about the case and wanted to support other victims of property fraud. We successfully recovered stolen land in 8 additional cases, returning millions of dollars worth of property to rightful owners. Sarah Chen, the private investigator who had helped expose the original fraud, joined the fund as its executive director. She developed a network of legal experts, investigators, and advocates who could respond quickly when families discovered they were victims of property theft. "Your case changed everything," Sarah told me during our quarterly board meeting. Before this, criminals thought they could steal inherited property without consequences because most families did not have the resources to fight back. Now they know we are watching. The experience taught me 3 crucial lessons that I share with every family who contacts us for help. First, always monitor your inherited property actively, even if you are not planning to use it immediately. Criminals target properties where the owners are not paying attention. Second, never face these battles alone. Property fraud schemes are sophisticated and require teams of specialists to uncover and prosecute. Individual families cannot fight billion-dollar criminal enterprises without professional help and community support. Third, justice is possible, but it requires courage, persistence, and the willingness to risk everything for what is right. There were many moments when I wanted to give up, when the harassment and financial pressure seemed overwhelming, but my grandfather's legacy was worth fighting for. The story attracted attention from federal lawmakers who were concerned about the vulnerability of inherited property to fraud schemes. Congress passed new legislation requiring additional safeguards for property transfers and increasing penalties for real estate fraud. I received hundreds of letters from people who had been inspired by the case to investigate their own property situations. Several discovered that they too were victims of fraud and were able to recover their land before the crimes were completed. The most meaningful letter came from an elderly woman in Oregon whose family farm had been stolen, using the same techniques that Blackstone had used on my property. Thanks to the legal precedent established by our case, she was able to recover her land and see the criminals prosecuted. Today, when I walk through Harrison Family Community Park and see children playing on the playground where my grandfather once grew corn, I know that his legacy is secure. The land that he loved and protected has become a place where entire families can create new memories and build community together. The criminals who thought they could steal our family heritage are spending years in federal prison, paying the price for their greed and corruption. And I have learned that sometimes, when you fight for justice with everything you have, you can win more than you ever imagined possible.